Hello, everybody. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back for another episode of the Back of the Pack podcast. I am your host, Kyle Walker. We are brought to you by OKKC Sports. Thank you so very much for joining us. Hope everyone had a great week, good training, good runs, good races, if this was a race weekend for you. I know that there were quite a few marathons around the country that were kicking off today. The Providence Marathon was one. There was the Prairie Fire Marathon here in the state of Kansas. Last weekend we had the Land of Oz Marathon. So, it's spring, it's running season, a lot of races kicking off around town. I hope you were out there doing your thing and getting your miles in. This was the second weekend in a row for me with two 5Ks, a Saturday morning 5K and a Sunday morning 5K. And I did it last week and it was no problem. Did a race on Saturday, no worries. Did a race on Sunday, no worries. This weekend was a little different though. I don't know why. I don't have like a really great explanation as to what in the world happened. So I had the Corporate Challenge 5K on Saturday morning. This is something that happens here in Kansas City. It's called Kansas City Corporate Challenge. Your business can sign up for it and you compete against other businesses of similar size in different events all across town. And Saturday morning was the 5K. Okay, no problem. I wanted to do well for that race. And if you follow us on Instagram, you'll see I posted a picture. I'm in the shirt and a little headpiece of the company I work for. That's my day job. Oddly enough, podcasting here doesn't seem to pay all the bills or any of them. But so I went out there and I wanted to support my workplace and I wanted to do really well. It's a course that I'm familiar with, a 5K that I've done before. It shares the same route as a different race here in town. They run the same stretch of road. So I know this one well. So I went out really hard for the Saturday morning race and I did pretty well. Now, here's something that really annoys the heck out of me. And this is one of my biggest running pet peeves. I have my bib. It was one of the companies that puts your timing chip on the back of your bib. I got no results listed. I went across their starting mat and I went across the finishing mat, but somewhere in the world there, my bib stopped working. So I don't really have an official finisher time for the race Saturday morning, which really chafes my hide, as I think I did rather well. Like I said, I was running this as, in my mind, it was as competition, not just as a fun weekend run for me. I think I finished the race right around 35 and a half minutes. For me, that's really good. My average is still higher than I want it to be. My average over all my races, I think, is right at 42 minutes. And that's because I've also factored in color runs and glow runs and the runs where you're not really running. You go to different stations and have fun. Warrior Dash, I remember that one, if you remember that race. So I factored all those into my 5K time. So my 5K time is a little high, the average is, but it's around 42. So I did this in 35 and a half, even though I didn't get an official finisher time. So that for me was pretty good. I did work really hard. And as we've talked about in previous episodes, one of the keys for recovery is you rest a day for each mile that you ran. So if I ran 3 miles on Saturday, I shouldn't be running again until Wednesday. Well, that brings us to Sunday morning. We had yet another 5K here in town. This was the Outpacing Melanoma 5K, which is a benefit for skin cancer research. Definitely a worthy cause. And so I'm happy to support this cause. I go out there Sunday morning and I had one of those races where I knew within the first half mile, this was not my day. This was not going to be another race where I had a good time or I did well. This was simply going to be survive and advance. I had nothing. My legs had nothing. My stamina had nothing. My lungs had nothing. I just couldn't find my stride. I couldn't find my breathing. I couldn't tell you if I went out too fast or too slow. I couldn't get my legs to do what I wanted them to do. My race was garbage. And so I went from a 35 and a half minute run on Saturday to a 40-minute run on Sunday and did not feel good about it at all. It was a disappointing race. I'm sure you've had disappointing races. They are no fun. You kind of feel like you wasted your time and money. And then not to mention, neither race this weekend did medals. Who doesn't do medals anymore? I couldn't believe it. Yeah, I feared it, but it kind of boggled my mind. Corporate challenge. I understand why you're not doing medals. You're a corporate challenge. That's just more money you're spending. Understood. Outpacing melanoma 5K. You're for cancer research. That's where the money needs to go. It doesn't need to go to feeding my ego and giving me a medal. So I understand why both these races didn't have medals, but I like medals. They make me happy. So I was a little bummed that there was not one in either race. So Medal Monday, which is coming up. If you're not following us on Instagram or Facebook, I hope that you will. You can find us at Back of the Pack Podcast on both. But we like to do Medal Mondays where we kind of show off our bling from the weekend. I always post one. I love it when people post theirs as well in the comments. Show off your bling. Honestly, that's how I find out about races I want to do, is I see other people posting pictures of the medals and I think, ooh, I want that medal. I want to go do that race. So really, you're not showing off. You're educating me as to future races that I want to do and possibly cover for this show. That's what it is. So when you see the post tomorrow, because I'm recording this on Sunday, for Medal Monday, I hope that you'll play along and grab your bling from the race you just ran this weekend, or maybe it's one that you've run before that you just like, and respond in the comments and show it off. Let's see what you got. So that was my weekend. One race was good, one race was bad, and I get back-to-back races. You're asking a lot. Thankfully, that's the end of that for a while. Next weekend, just one 5K on Saturday morning. This is for mental health out in Cass County. That is in Missouri. So I'm going to have a bit of a drive in front of myself for Saturday morning of next week. But again, another worthy cause. And if I like the cause, I'm willing to drive to the race. But that should be a nice little 5K come Saturday morning. And then I'm off until my next half marathon, which is on May 14th. And I have to say, this marathon now brings sadness to me. Much sadness. If you are a runner in the Kansas City area, then you'll know the race I'm talking about when I say that in 2 weeks, I am doing Running with the Cows. This is a half marathon in Bucyrus, Kansas. It benefits the local Catholic school and church there in town. And they've announced this is the last year they're going to do it. I think they're somewhere up in the neighborhood of 15 years. I believe that's how long they've been going. It's getting close to that, but they've announced this is going to be the last time that they do Running with the Cows. Not going to lie, that made me very sad. This is one of my top 5 favorite half marathons, and I'm really going to miss it once it's gone. For quite a few years now, it has been part of a series offered here in town, the Heartland 39.3 series, which it was 3 half marathons in 5 weeks. And then it's kind of changed and mutated, and now it's 3 marathons over the course of 3 months. So not quite the same. But the Running with the Cows has been with that series since the beginning. And I know I've done that series at least 10 times. So yeah, I think about 5 years is where Running with the Cows is at. They're closing up, shutting up shop. They're not going to do it anymore, which means I won't have any reason really to go out to Bucyrus, Kansas, which is a beautiful town. I'm not ragging on it at all. If I could afford to live in Bucyrus, I absolutely would. But those houses out there, they got some nice ones. I cannot afford that. Unless this podcast really takes off, then who knows? Maybe I'll become a Bucyrus resident. So I will be looking forward to doing Running with the Cows, but it will be with a heavy heart, as it will, once I'm done and once I leave, it's over. No more cow run for me. They've always had good shirts. They've always had good medals, and the entire town comes out for that race. Like, they do it well. There's good support, good volunteers, great food at the end. It's been a lot of fun. I'm going to miss it. So not that I ever expect this podcast to reach the ears of anyone from Running with the Cows, although it'd be great if it did. Hey, to you guys, I say thank you. Thank you for however many times I've run this race, and it's been quite a few, for always having a great race, and I've always had a good time. And the only thing that we couldn't count on was the weather. But other than that, we knew we were going to have fun when we came out to the Running with the Cows half marathon in Bucyrus, Kansas. So the best to them. I'm really going to try and do myself proud at that race. I've done that race well before. Hopefully I can recapture some energy and some form of old, and I don't know, have a good showing. Have a good showing at the Cows. Again, for me, under 3 hours. If I could do the Cows in under 3 hours, I'm going to be the happiest guy I know. My first 2 half marathons of this year, and I had the one that was a minute and a half over 3 hours, and then I had the one that was 6 seconds under 3 hours. And I don't care if it's 6 seconds. I will take the under every time. So, okay, that's what's coming up. Now, I like talking about the races. I like talking about big races. Right now, we're kind of in a lull on any of the World Marathon majors. Boston just completed. Tokyo has already done theirs. London comes up in the fall. Berlin in the fall. Chicago in the fall. New York in the fall. So that's kind of where we're at on that. Everything is filled up. I think Boston will start opening up their qualifications in September, and then the charity bibs will become available after that. If you're like me and your only hope is a charity bib, jump on it. The quicker you get on it when they open up, the better chance you've got of securing a charity bib and at least being able to try and raise the money to get it. But Chicago's full, London's full, Berlin's full. I think that's all of them right now. New York is full. So you're kind of done with the World Marathon majors until next year. But if you're still looking for a fall race, there's plenty of them. And we're going to actually talk about that a little later in the year, as we're going to have the president of the Kansas City Marathon come on to this show. The man, the race director, the man in charge is going to come on this show and talk about the Kansas City Marathon here soon. So I'm super excited about that. He's one of the big surprises and big guests that we're getting lined up for this show. I hope you will be back for that. Anyway, I know I'm bouncing all over the place. It's been a long day and I'm tired. I've done races. I've done 2 races and no medals. So I was thinking, okay, well, what should we talk about today? Because I like to talk about something. I like to not just impart my knowledge, like there's a lot of that to go around, but also what other people have said about things. I thought, what would be a good one? Okay, well, I went from having a really good race on Saturday to a really crummy race on Sunday. I'm not the only one who's done that. How do you bounce back? How do you bounce back from a bad race? And not surprisingly, there are tons of articles and expert advice on how to do just that. If you run a race that's bad, and trust me, if you've run more than 5 races in your career, you've had a bad race. One that you just thought was, meh, that was terrible, and I don't want to do it again, then this is for you. Because I had a bad race. Saturday was good. Today, it was bad. Nothing went right. So this is what they say about running a bad race. And of course, normally I will defer to Runner's World. I do like Runner's World. They seem to cover everything. A lot of articles come from the UK, but they're still relevant and just as important. Sorry, I don't even know why I prefaced that. That's silly. This article is a little old, but I found it was good. They asked some mental health people and some running coaches and just sports people in general about how to get past bad performances. And this is some of the stuff they said. And this I thought was funny. If Highway to Hell is an apt description of your last race, consider the thoughts of poet John Keats, who called failure the highway to success. It may seem contradictory to celebrate a flop, but experts agree that losses can fuel future wins. A bad race is an opportunity to gather information, learn, and improve, says Ralph Heath, a runner and author of Celebrating Failure, The Power of Taking Risks, Making Mistakes, and Thinking Big. Yeah, that's the name of his book. That actually sounds really good. I'm going to add that to my Amazon list. Turning a negative into a positive may seem impossible, especially when your war wounds still sting. But the sooner you learn from the past, the faster you can move on. And here's how. See, that sounds good. Scream and shout. That's number 1. And I didn't do that out loud today, but I certainly did it a lot in my head. There's a lot of screaming and shouting. After a bad race, many of us feel disappointed, says sports psychologist Gloria Belage. I hope I'm saying her name correctly. Some runners get highly emotional because they see it as a personal failing, she says. If you're invested in your running and don't get the return, feelings of disappointment are natural, and it's healthy to express them. It shows commitment. This grieving stage may last a few hours or days, but it's not helpful if it lingers. Prolonged grieving lowers confidence, says Belage. When you are unable to evaluate what happened and point to a solution, it may signal underlying issues. The doctor recommends pinpointing the source of your anguish. Are you embarrassed by how others view your performance, ashamed that shortcuts in your training caused it, or upset with Mother Nature for unleashing a heat wave? Whatever it is, isolating the source will help you work through your feelings and regain your emotional balance. Okay, I actually think that's really helpful. I've said in previous episodes that we need to learn from our runs, kind of learn from our mistakes and learn from our successes. And thankfully, she's saying much of the same thing. But if we hang on to a run too long, if we hang on to a bad result for too long, it can do a lot more damage than good. Then you're not taking the lesson and learning from it. You're just holding on to it and you're using it as an excuse for other bad performances. And honestly, I've done this as well. I've done this. Oh, where did I do this? Oh, man. 2019, the Grandma's Marathon in Duluth, Minnesota. I think I've talked about this before. And if I'm repeating myself, let me apologize. But that race was set up for perfection, perfect weather, perfect running conditions, a difficult course, but not an insanely bad course. Everything was lined up for me to do well. And it was my single worst marathon performance ever. Now, I had to learn from my mistakes. What did I do wrong? Well, I did several things wrong. First off, my training was garbage. I mean, it kind of begins and ends right there. My training was garbage. I went into that race in terrible shape. I didn't have good runs. I didn't have good training. It just kind of snuck up on me that year. It was a June race. And I don't remember if maybe 2019, we had an especially bad winter here in the Midwest. But either which way, my training was just all off. And there's a part of me, and I'm going to confide in you all, just because I trust you and you're not going to make fun of me too much. There's a part of me that has thought this for a long time. And every time I think on it, and then I hang my hat on it, and then I take it and use it in the world, it does nothing but bite me in the keister. But I remember having this thought going into my second full marathon, and this is way back in 2014. I was getting ready to do the Rock and Roll Marathon in New Orleans. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, your training's not been that good. You're not in the best shape of your life. But you know what? You've done a marathon before. You know how to do it. It'll be fine. You just kind of get by on your past experience. It's nothing new. You know you can get it done. Yeah, I went into this and I talked myself into the most ridiculous stuff. You've done a marathon before, so your training doesn't matter this time. Yeah, the marathon you did before was in 2011, in the fall of 2011. You went well over a year, actually 2 years in between full marathons. And I was still trying to lean on the training and lean on the experience of the first one that it was going to somehow magically get me through the second one. Well, I'm sure this will come as no surprise to you, but my second one was terrible. I did awful in New Orleans, but oddly enough, I did even worse in Minnesota. So yeah, so I tried to play. I played a very dangerous mental game with myself. But after Minnesota, because that race was so bad, again, another mental game I played with myself was holding on to that disappointment in myself and the disappointment in others. And I'm sure there wasn't disappointment in others, but like for that trip, I took my mother and I took my daughters. They were all there at the finish line as I finished my worst marathon to date, and still overall my worst marathon. So I felt shame in myself, and I put my shame and I put it on them, like they were going to feel it as well, even though they didn't. They were just thrilled to be there and see me finish a marathon. They didn't know that my time stunk. They didn't know that I was embarrassed. They didn't know that I had a terrible race. They were just happy to be there and see me finish. But yeah, I let that prolonged grieving, I let it lower my confidence. And so it took a while before I was ready to marathon again. So, okay, let's move on to the next point. Sorry, I kind of hung on that one a while. Dissect the race. Once the cursing subsides, examine your misadventure. Every race is a learning experience, so whatever happened is really okay, says Corey Niamora, a running coach, clinical psychologist, and director of Endurance Sports and Psychology Center in Berkeley, California. Hey, those are pretty good credentials right there. The first step is to separate what you couldn't control, poor weather, illness, from what you could control, uneven pacing, inadequate training. Make peace with the first and focus on rectifying the second. Instead of analyzing this in your head, Niamora recommends going over the details of your race with someone else, ideally an experienced runner or coach. Writing about the experience in a journal or blog can also be helpful. Your internal thoughts can be overly critical, but when you write about an experience, you tend to be less negative and more objective, he says. Okay, so let me hammer on this one a little bit. Dissect the race. I think that's something you should always do. Good run or bad, dissect what went right and what went wrong. I think that's just good practice for any race. And I'm going to plug a little bit here. Pardon my plug. If you go to www.backofthepackpodcast.com, you'll see that we have a blog. And what I do on this blog is dissect the race that I just ran. I try and put it out there for my benefit and for yours. So you can kind of see, if you're new to running, kind of the mental focus or the mental aspect of a runner, of which I do consider myself, even though I don't look like one. But you can kind of see some of the thoughts that go on, before, during, and after the race. So that's why we do this blog. I want to break down and dissect these races, and I type them up the day that I do the race. So they're fresh, they're there, and they're for me and for everyone else to kind of read and hopefully learn from. And if you take anything from one of my blogs, then hey, super great, I've done something right. But I am definitely a big fan in dissecting the race. Now, I do find this new and different to say dissect it with somebody else. That I think would actually be really helpful, but also in agreement with what this says, dissect it with someone who knows what the hell they're doing. Dissect it with a running coach, dissect it with a running friend. But, if you just go and talk to your spouse about it and your spouse has never laced on a pair of running shoes in their lives, well, they're going to be like, yeah, oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. They're going to be supportive, but I don't know how much that's going to actually help you dissect the race that you just ran. And then the last one here from Runner's World, and this probably is the most important and / the most difficult: move forward. Though signing up for another event is a good way to move on, Niamura says it's important to think of the next race as independent from the last one and not as another go. That mindset will make you feel extra pressure, and that could hurt your performance, he says. Niamura encourages runners to space out the events. Don't rush to a race again the following weekend. Whoops. This point is especially important if you run long distance. You might be eager to redeem yourself, but if your muscles aren't fully recovered, you could be setting yourself up for another bad race. The rule of thumb is that before competing again, you need 1 day of recovery for every mile you race. We've heard that before. You should also consider the emotional toll that a bad race took on you. If you're desperate to prove something to yourself or others, or you're still angry about the last race, wait, says Niamura. It might be best to take a break from racing until you've emotionally recovered and you really miss it. That I understand. That makes a ton of sense. Now, as I said, I didn't give myself any time to recover before this morning's race. I raced yesterday. I had a Saturday. If you're a grown adult, your Saturdays normally consist of doing other things. You don't just get to lay around on the couch after a 5K. After a half marathon, I'm absolutely laying on the couch. Everyone leave me alone. But after a 5K, you still have to adult. You still have to get through life. You have to go do your Costco run, and you got to go do errands, and you got to go clean the floor, or you got to do the dishes, or your kids are going to annoy the heck out of you, whatever the case might be. In that example, most of that was me yesterday. But you can't just lay around after a 5K as much as you want. So, there was no rest for me. So with no rest, I tried to go and do this morning's 5K. Of course, I was disappointed in the results. So I, in quote, had a bad race. But as we've seen here, bad races happen. Bad races are things that we can learn from, and we can definitely move on from. Now, when we get to Saturday morning of next week and I'm driving out to my new race, today is really not going to be in the back of my head. It's no big deal. I've had worse races than this morning's, so I know that I'm not emotionally damaged by it. But even if I went to the start line and I started saying, all right, I'm going to crush last week. Last Sunday was so terrible. I must go and destroy it. That's not going to do me any good. That's not the mental mindset that I even want to be in. I want to be in I'm at another start line. I'm thankful that I'm able to race this weekend. Let's go. Let's turn on the music. Let's get lost in the run, and let's have a good Saturday morning. That's the mindset that I want to have. That's the mindset I always want to have when I get to a start line. Not one of revenge, as if the course has done me wrong, but just, a thankful approach is what I try and have. Because if you read yesterday's blog, I kind of started with these days that we get to run, these days that we get to get up on a Saturday morning, we get to go to a race, and we get to get the medal at the end and have the chocolate milk, eat the banana, take the pictures. There is a day where that ends. There's a day where that stops. Whether it be health reasons, injury, time, commitments, whatever it is, there is a day we stop towing the start line. And I don't want to go there with these negative feelings in my heart. I want to go there as joyful and thankful as I can be for the fact that I get to go and tow another start line. I'm going to get to go finish another race. I'm going to get my medal. I'm going to get my banana. And I'm thankful for the opportunity to do so. So don't ever take these races for granted, because there's going to be a day you don't get to do it anymore. And I know for me, as I sit here as a 42-year-old who's already had 2 open heart surgeries, there's going to be a day I have to stop. Thankfully, it's not this day. And I hope it's not the next day. But there's a day I'm going to have to stop. And I just kind of discovered doing this podcasting stuff now. And I've been enjoying the heck out of it. I hope you all are as well. But I want to keep this going as long as I can. And so I'm certainly not going to be sidelined by the mental aspect and by taking a bad race and holding on to it for too long. I refuse. So at the conclusion of this podcast, I'm going to write up my blog for this morning's race. I'm going to submit it to my producer. She is going to post it. And then I am leaving the 2022 Outpacing Melanoma 5K behind me. And I am moving on to the next race. So that's what we're going to do. Now, on a completely separate note, completely different, at this morning's race, my daughters both ran. My daughters are 15 and 12. They both did great. They crushed it. The back of the packettes, as I call them, they came in first and third in their respective age divisions. I couldn't be prouder of them. Great job, young ladies. I knew you guys were going to go out there and crush it, as worried as you were. It's been so long since we run a 5K. Yes, but you're both small children and you're in great shape. So go run. My youngest got first place in her age division. Her time was, I think, 26 minutes, 39 seconds. That's ridiculous. And then my 15-year-old, she was third place in her age division at a time of 30 minutes and I think 33 seconds, somewhere right in there. So they both did great. So good job out of them. We will probably post a picture of them on Instagram, as I'm their father and they don't mind and they love the attention. So you guys will see them with their medals. And that's going to do it for this episode of the Back of the Pack podcast. I want to thank you guys for joining me as always. Please like, share, and subscribe on any social media platform that you can find us, or wherever you get your podcast from. You know, we're on Instagram. That's where a lot of the fun happens. And then that translates over into Facebook. A lot of the stuff happens there. I love interaction. I love your feedback. I love when you guys post your pictures and post your medals, and we talk about running stuff. We talk about music. We can talk about routes and races. It's really cool. And then for anyone who's asked me for a sticker, and I know there's a few of you, there's some that I still need to mail out. There was a delay, and the reason was I had more goodies coming, and I wanted to not just send you the stickers, but I wanted to send you all the goodies that are coming. They finally got here, so I'm going to try and get your stuff in the mail this week, and you will have stickers and then some show surprises. That is from me to you, and I want to thank you for supporting this show as early on as you guys did. You all are the best. We are selling some shirts, giving away some swag, doing some stuff. So with your help and with your shares and with your likes and with you telling your friends about the show, this thing can get even bigger. If you like it, share it. If you don't like it, tell me where to get better. I'm good with that too. Hey, thank you everyone for joining me. I do appreciate it. We'll be back next week with a new episode of the Back of the Pack podcast here on OKKC Sports. My name is Kyle Walker. Thank you for joining us as always. This show is produced and edited and mixed by Katie O'Neill, and we love what we do. So thank you all so much. We will see you next week.